And now a message from the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo.
All right, let's do this. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Hello. I am New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo. In the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, I have been credited with saving countless lives, sometimes unfairly so, since I did not do it alone. And that is why today I would like to address the secret to my success. Today, I think it's finally time I address my mob ties. That's right. My mob ties. Ties for every occasion. Okay? Look, you're looking to quiet some protesters. You're going to need a mob tie. You want to side with the police for no apparent reason. You're going to need a mob tie. You got a press conference. You're going to need a mob tie. Everybody gets a mob tie. All right? My family's mob ties go back generations and originated in the old country. And they're going to make you look good no matter if you're making backroom deals with the MTA or simply making backroom deals with Amazon. And unlike other mob ties, mine were created right here in the great state of New York thanks to federal tax breaks. Seriously, I love a loophole. I mean, look at these loopholes. You can't do no better. And with all these different colors and designs, no one's going to notice that during an election year, you're basically repeating the same patterns over and over and over again, while only giving the illusion that you're going to change. You're not. I mean, lots of people have been asking me, hey, a mob tie is even, still a thing? They are. And, hey, my brother, Chris Cuomo, how do you think he got that job on CNN? You think it was talent? No, it was mob ties. Everybody knows. All right. Now, getting into them has never been easy, all right? Take any standard mob tie, right? All right. Now, you want to put it around your neck around an election year, and then as the election gets closer, you want to move further and further to the left, and then the second you're sworn in, you move to the center and you stay there. Hell, you're going to even go to the right. What are they going to do, impeach you? They won't, because they're intimidated by your mob tie. Yeah. Now, if you act now, I'll also throw in some of my syndicated crime rings. Now, these are great because they go right on your nipples. No, I will not be taking any questions at this time. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Andrew Cuomo, and I want you to go fuck yourself.
Everyone, welcome back to Electoral Dysfunction, the show where comedians and experts talk about the news of the week from the safety of their quarantine. And what a great week for America. I mean, right now, I think this weekend, Disney World officially reopening. And in honor of that, I am wearing my Thanos-themed Disney Park Magic Band because my guess is 50% of you aren't making it back. I wouldn't come to Disney World right now. Florida's seeing an upsurge. It's crazy. I love Disney World. Epcot World Showcase may be my favorite place on the planet. You could not pay me to go there right now. All right? Just as Europe would not take us, I will not go to the Italy Pavilion. We got a great show for you today. It's like an Electoral Dysfunction all-star game. We've got some of our greatest, favorite panelists are here. I want to say a quick thank you to Governor Andrew Cuomo for that opening, a.k.a. Andrew Kindler. And do a quick reminder to all of you that the people who do this show volunteer their time, volunteer their talents. They do it because they love the show. They love entertaining you. And if you feel like giving a little bit back to them, head right on over to patreon.com/electoral dysfunction and throw a little bit of change their way. 100% of the profits you send will go directly to the performers. I will not take a dime. I'm still working, still rolling in that mid to just above death range of income that gets you by in New York City. But in all seriousness, these folks work really hard. And if you want to send some money, you will know it will go directly to them for their efforts. That's it for me. To my director and pal, Ned Thorne, Star White me to the panel. And join me in welcoming this week's panel. And it is going to be a great one. I said it in the opening. This is like the Electoral Dysfunction all-star game. I'm really excited for this one. First up, she's a very funny comedian, one of the stars and creators of Netflix's Astronomy Club. And to a certain improv theater, I will simply say, pay Keisha Zoller. Hey, Keisha, how are you?
I'm good, and I like being paid. Also, if you're an Emmy voter, vote for Astronomy Club.
Yep. So note that, Emmy voters. Next up, she is the co-host of the podcast DTF, the Daryl and Timmery Fun Hour, and also the producer and co-creator of the show Do Both, which is lectures and burlesque together. Dr. Timmery Schmidt. Hey, Timmery, how are you?
Oh, hello. Yes, I am currently wearing more clothes than usual.
Yep. Well, we appreciate the sacrifice. In the streets of Philadelphia, he is known as young Ben Franklin. In the schools of Philadelphia, he's Mr. Kuncio. And just this week, for the first time, his daughter referred to him as Dada. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Kuncio is back. Hey, Chris.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Loving life, living in my in-laws' basement.
Excellent. It's the safest place to be. And then coming to us from the mean streets of Springfield, content creator for change.org, formerly of the North Carolina campaign for Hillary Clinton presidency. Ladies and gentlemen, Shreya Sarkar. Hey, Shreya.
Oh, hello. I didn't have a funny quip prepared, so I'll just go back to eating my lunch.
That's the funniest quip of all. And editorial columnist for the New York Daily News and Mike's Hard Lemonade enthusiast, Robert George. Hey, Robert.
Hey there, Tom. And I also am wearing more clothes than I usually am. So
That's very true. Normally, we just zoom in a set of clothes for you as a backdrop screen and just make
and also it's a rare moment where you have my actual graphics novel library behind me as opposed to the green screen version. So
yeah, the photo that you show for, I assume, privacy reasons.
There you go.
So welcome, panel. Welcome back to the show, many of you. And what a week for the rule of law. Rule of law died on Friday, July 11th. It didn't particularly have a very productive life in the United States of America anyway, in my opinion, but it was still sad to see it go. Roger Stone, former Batman villain and, of course, political consultant to luminaries like President Richard Nixon and current President Donald Trump, had his sentence commuted yesterday by the president. He was about to serve, I think, 40 months in jail for witness tampering, for obstructing investigations. But the president, and this is the president's justification for it, because he's older and because he didn't flip, explicitly said, because he didn't betray me, he's commuted the sentence. He will see no time in jail. I'm just going to dovetail here. My favorite part of the Trump administration, I have a lot of friends who I think are doing pretty well in life. They're well-off people, and they all seem stunned whenever rich people get off scot-free. And I'm just fascinated by that because I feel like that's always been the way. Rich people get out of trouble. That's just how it works. But why now? Why was Roger Stone's sentence commuted now? He was about to start serving it, so that's a big part of it. They didn't want him to see a day in jail. But it's intriguing to me that the law and order president at this moment in time made that call, particularly on a Friday night. What do you think? Robert George.
I have a theory.
All
I have a couple of theories. And it dovetails perfectly, Tom, with the way you set up this segment when you said that the rule of law died on Friday. While that's a slight overstatement, it's a very slight overstatement. Trump did this because we had for about maybe a little bit more than 24 hours some universal huzzas that the rule of law is still in place because the U.S. Supreme Court had pushed back against the president in two significant cases where they were both decided 7-2, and the particulars we can get into a little bit later. But the most important one, where there was unanimity amongst the 9 justices, was that the President of the United States does not have universal carte blanche to say no to a subpoena, particularly a subpoena that is involved in the in a criminal investigation, and that people were a little bit were worried that conservative-leaning Supreme Court was going to actually accept the arguments that that the White House, that the president was pushing forward, that says that a president, when he's in office, has basically universal immunity from any kind of a subpoena, whether it's coming from a district attorney or whether it's coming from Congress. And the Supreme Court said, nope, that's not quite. Congress, you have to cross your T's and dot your I's and so forth when you're presenting your subpoenas. And there could be some arguments down at the lower level as to the scope of a particular subpoena, but a president does not have immunity. And so everybody, for again, about a little bit more than 24 hours, says, yes, the rule of law is still in place. And then Donald Trump says, one moment, please. And that's how we got back to.
That was a great imitation of him.
And that's how we got back to Roger Stone getting his sentence commuted for, even as Roger Stone himself admitted in an interview, because he didn't flip. He said he told journalist Howard Fineman, I could have given information to investigators that would have made my situation a lot easier. I didn't do that, and the president rewarded me with a commutation. So, boom.
Very nice. An important thing I read this morning also about a commutation versus a pardon is that a commutation benefits, I believe, Donald Trump, because it ensures that it protects, protects Roger Stone in the future to invoke the Fifth Amendment on more things that he may be called on in terms of what he said to the president or what the president may know about any of his shady dealings.
But it's important to know, though, Tom, that Stone wanted the commutation versus the pardon, because in the context of a pardon, the recipient of the pardon implicitly admits guilt to the underlying crime. And Roger Stone is still officially fighting, appealing his conviction. So he welcomed the commutation versus the pardon.
So thoughts
Can I
on
ask
this?
a quick question?
Please.
For those of us not so in tune with with the fine art of rich people law skirting, what exactly is the difference between commuting and pardoning?
Well, Robert, I'll just jump in. I know for pardoning, you have to be like, "Hey, I did it. Pardon me," and the other one's like, "I don't know. I didn't do it." And that's literally the difference. It's one is, "Yo, I did it. Get me off." Hence Arpaio. Remember that boy who's living his best life free?
Yep. And also, I think pardoning, if I'm not mistaken, basically expunges the record. Commutation means like you're still, that record still exists, but like in the case of Stone, time served. That's it.
Yeah. Or in this case,
no time served.
Non-time served. Non-time served. Exactly. Yeah. But but teacher, that is basically it. The key thing is Roger Stone is still officially in the eyes of the law a convicted felon, even though he's appealing he's appealing the verdict or the verdicts. However, he does not have to go to prison because he's a 60-something old white man, and this is the time of the pandemic, and it would be too cruel to let him go to jail.
That sounds like something that a senator from South Carolina said. That was what Lindsey Graham, chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, said. It seems fair because he's so old and prison would be so hard on him.
I mean, it just makes me think of all the other Black and brown folks and people who are in that same situation, but are stuck in prison for nonviolent offenses. I mean, Sorry, that's my 2020 rage.
No, please.
In fairness, Donald Trump, one of Donald Trump's first pardons.
For the record, saying in fairness, Donald Trump is never going to work for me. But go ahead, continue. Let's hear it.
Yeah, that's as italics and asterisks as you get.
So bad. And he didn't know the difference between commutation and pardon. He didn't have Keisha explaining it beautifully. Sorry, Robert, go ahead.
One of his earliest pardons, and
he probably had stick figures.
A number of several people actually said that this that one of the reasons why he did this was because so he could pardon and commute people like Roger Stone and Paul Manafort later down the road. One of them, though, was a black woman who was in prison for her role in like hiding a drug dealer. And
this wasn't this year, right?
No. This was 2 years ago. This was
This is the Kim Kardashian of it all.
Yeah, that was no. That's exactly.
Never forget, Kim Kardashian was like, "I am trying to help." So even that is like, nah, Kim Kardashian.
She's the political campaign manager now, so we can't knock her. She's Kanye's campaign manager.
That is correct. That is absolutely correct. But I just wanted to say, though, that, and this is like something, of course, Lindsey Graham also got wrong, because he said, oh, well, the sentence of Roger Stone, this 40-month sentence for a first time non-violent offense. This older black woman, I'll dig up her name before the show's over. She was serving a life sentence as a first time nonviolent offender, and by the way, that was a just pardon. But to Keisha's point, it was a just pardon in the sense of this woman was released because she got out on the Donald Trump, friends and family plan.
I'm having a difficult time because I'm very much in the place where I want to get rid of policing and prisons as the way we solve problems, right? So I want to be abolitionist in terms of this stuff, but then it's like, if we're going to have prisons, then those are the people that need to go there.
Right.
If that's going to be the way we solve stuff, if that's how we punish things, I want Roger Stone in there. I don't want, why is Chelsea Manning in prison? Reality Winner's been in there for a while, stuff like that. In addition to the stuff that Keisha was mentioning earlier about how we've used policing and prisons as a way to basically just be real racist for a long time,
Well,
go ahead, Robert.
Just to the point, the problem we have with there's a lot of problems with Donald Trump in the White House. But in terms of what is happening with the rule of law and similar adjacent things like criminal justice reform, the only time that we are seeing, say, support at the White House level for some of the what we were talking about before, Alice Marie Johnson, by the way, is the name of the black woman who was pardoned 2 years ago at the urging of Kim Kardashian. In a similar way, the reason why the First Step Act that allowed for the commutation and the early release of a number of people who have been in federal prison because of nonviolent drug offenses, the reason why that happened is because Jared Kushner, whose father, Charles Kushner, had served federal time, prosecuted by Chris Christie back when he was a U.S. attorney. Jared Kushner felt that his family had been impacted by the power of the federal government, so he suddenly got behind the whole idea of criminal justice reform, which is a valid cause, but it was for somewhat kind of corrupt practices. I mean, it's like, oh my goodness, the federal government can do this, and look what it did to my dad. I'm getting behind reform. But and then Kim Kardashian says this woman should be released. Yes, it's good that this woman should be released, but it shouldn't just be because because wealthy and connected individuals suddenly see the light because other wealthy and connected individuals actually were paying a legitimate price. Because
at that point, we're just in a monarchy, and it feels like we're in a monarchy right now of I'm a rich person of a certain class that God entitled. Now I care because it impacts me. I feel like we are in a capitalistic monarchy, and I'm being constantly gaslit because I only like the billionaires only care about issues if it impacts them. And like maybe it'll trickle down to the average person because Gerald don't give a shit about folks in prison now who are black and brown. He just cares about his daddy.
It's a, by the way, just one adjective in front of what you said. It's a crony capitalistic monarchy.
Thank you.
Exactly, because it's not. There
You're
are
right.
there are aspects of we can argue about capitalism and its goods and bads and things like that. But in its best form, it's not supposed to play favorites the way that crony capitalism explicitly does.
I will agree with you, Robert George. This isn't free market monarchy capitalism. This is literally crony.
Right.
Like Tony. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Well
Do
done.
it again.
I have a friend with like this very old Russian grandma, and she loves Trump because she's like, it's the return of the czar. She loves this part of it because there's a very significant part of the population who actually is very cool with authoritarianism because it's very comforting to have dad be in charge, even if dad gets drunk and beats everyone. There's still a lot of people who really like the solidity of knowing that there's a tough guy who tells people what to do.
Yeah.
So
Tough guy.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
but
the fact
it's
that I
that
could beat the hell out of
clarity.
him.
It's that sort of it means you don't have to think as much if someone else just tells you what to do. And even I, as someone who fancies himself pretty progressive, I mean, there are days where I'm like, boy, I wish I didn't have to think today, but I have to.
And as a black woman, all I'll say is thank God I get to think. You might be, I might be tired, but I was woo, this beats the alternative. Cause I know I mean, history has taught us the alternative. I'm grateful for this burden.
Yeah.
If I can
And as a black man, I reserve the right not to think if it could accidentally get me killed.
I'll allow you that. Chris, you had a point before.
Well, I was until
Sorry,
yeah.
Corey, sorry.
Well, as the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male here.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Catholic. That makes me different than you.
No, I know.
You have more privilege than I do. Yes.
I know. I'm the top. It's
the difference between an A+ and an A.
No, yeah, I wasn't trying to interrupt and do that because
well, Robert's a Republican, so you can interrupt him in that capacity.
That's what I was going for, but then he dropped in the demographics, and I was like, fuck. So, yeah, thanks for that. It's just really interesting. I think when I think about how am I teaching this to my students, it's really hard or disheartening. On the one hand, it's actually refreshing. To be fair for Trump, he is so blatant and clumsy with everything. This is you're talking about it's crony capitalism. It kind of looks like an after-school special of corruption, down to it's so obvious. Down to what's his name, looking like the Penguin.
Roger Stone.
Roger Stone, just looking like the Penguin who injected UV rays. He listened to Trump and he injected UV rays. I'm so glad that joke nailed. I was working on that joke for 10 minutes before.
Really good. Nice work.
Yes. But it's the nice thing is, if anything, is it's just he's not some behind the scenes player who's really good at this. He's really bad at this, and we're seeing every step of the way, every problem. It's disheartening because no one gives a fuck. And like you're saying, people are really, they want to be taken care of. And I sometimes wonder, I had this whole theory that Republicans are on the side of Trump because he's doing exactly what they want, which is tank the government. When Obama was in office, I was all about big government. Big government's awesome. Because if you're supporting and if you have someone who's brilliant running the show, yeah, I trust him. I trust his morals. Will he make mistakes? Absolutely. But can I sleep and not have to be on Twitter keeping track? No. With Trump, who can promote, big government now? Because we can't, apparently he can get into office, an idiot can get into office. He can be so blatantly corrupt and no one gives a shit. And so it's going to be really hard to like the next generation, the students who are coming up, getting them to feel like they can support big government. Because, you know, the Republicans have been pushing for years like this, oh, I want to be able to play checkers with my president. I want to be able to, like, I want a folksy guy. I don't want a liberal elite. Why the fuck would you want someone who's just playing checkers? I want someone who looks at me and says, I'm not playing chess with you because I already look at you and I can see I can beat you in 5 moves. Like, I want that person. And it's just really hard to, like, get that. Like,
well,
I want a president who views me as too stupid to be worth his time.
Well, the concern that, I mean, it's a very dwindling rump group at this point. But for those handful of us who do think of ourselves as libertarian in the context of the government, we would be the argument that we would make is that you've seen what the idea of big government when you got a corrupt incompetent at the top, and what kind of destruction and chaos an individual like that can wreak. Now imagine what it could be like if you had a corrupt competent guy at the top, and who also had all the powers of big government. How much, even as bad as it's been over at least the last 6 months, and for some people you would say for the last 3.5 years, it could be even worse if the guy in the White House was actually, you know, knew what he was doing.
That's why Mike Pence is so scary.
Can I push back on that, though?
I want to quickly.
Chris,
you can, but I just want to quickly. I want to A, say one thing, and B, Chris, have you just elaborate on something. I would say, to the point that Chris made before, not just big government, but like trust in every level of government has a certain, like, takes a hit when the presidency takes a hit, local, state. Chris, just for the listeners and for the rest of the panel, if you could just elaborate on where you teach, you know, what level of school you teach, you know, and what specifically you teach in school, because I think that's important context for what we're talking about here too.
So yeah, I teach 12th grade English in Old City, Philadelphia, which is, like he mentioned before, I do a tour as young Ben Franklin. Literally, it's the same block of the school that I'm on, or that I work at. My students are coming from one of the poorest districts or neighborhoods in the poorest large city in the country, which is Philadelphia. And, like, you know, I've spent the last 4 years on, like, weekends touting and, like, promoting, like, this, oh, America, you know, like, founding fathers, like, freedom, equality, and all that sort of stuff. And, like, just talking about, like, the good things that happened with the revolution, while during the week I'm dealing with the realities of all of the failures. And it's been really, it's a duality that has been, like, really tearing me down. And it's like, when I sit here and, like, look at all the problems that are going on within society, and I keep hearing from Republican side, libertarians saying, leave me alone, or it's capitalism and it's businesses that are doing it. Well, businesses are racist. And the government, you know, we sit here and say all the failures of the government. I've watched as libertarianism has, or like just like Republicans have just completely taken money out of government so that it's running incredibly inefficient. You know, like in Philadelphia, I'm dealing currently with issues related to tax revenue and tax abatements and all that. And they're sending me in circles because they don't even have a connection. There is no, like, operating system just on the sub level that can just keep everything streamlined. They have carbon copies. They have, like, they still call them facsimiles. Like, they are so outdated that of course it's inefficient. And I've also seen in the history of Philadelphia, some really corrupt officials have also gotten some shit done for their constituents. And so I'm not necessarily, like, human nature is human nature. There's never going to be, like, a perfect system. And I'm just tired of seeing, like, Republicans and everybody focusing on, well, if we give a handout to the lower class, they're going to take advantage of it. I'm tired of the handouts for for the wealthy billionaires and them taking advantage of it, and then nothing there. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. Sorry, I'll get off the pedestal.
No, I thought that context was important.
I just wanted, because this is where the abstract of diversity and actually overcoming a racist system matters. Like, my papa, who I love a lot, has talked and been involved with groups who, as Black people, have ideas around tech and innovation on how to take these systems and make them more efficient. And there's way to do that, but it requires upfront cost. And in my mind, all of this has to do with the fact we've never dealt with our original sin, paid the reparations, which is Black people by POC people. We were the seed money of this capitalistic system. And I don't say that to minimize it, but the people who are making money off our backs need to pay us our dividends. They need to pay, and it's going to cost money up front. It's going to mean losing something, and it's going to mean actually following through. It's not the size of the government. It's the fact people who have ideas are being kept out from even having the conversations. They're not at the table to be able to be like, oh, you have facsimiles? We can do this. And that's why you have so many different Black folks who are in positions of power being like, I'm clearing out all the debt of these HBCUs. Like, Black people who could have a seat at the table, who, like my dad, and I love my dad, but he has conservative leanings and probably would be a conservative if shit wasn't so racist. And like, that's where it's so hard, because it's, to your point, it's not big or small. It's, are you choosing the side of anti-racism, anti-bigotry, or, you know, crony, oppressive capitalism?
Dr. William Barber, I remember him saying, it's not right versus left, it's right versus wrong. And there's too many people who are like just so scared of the left that they're just like, oh, well, I'm going to take this or this guy.
It was really smart of the right wing to pull to when they were deciding which wing they got the nickname after, to take the one that had the word right in it. I think about that a lot in terms of like, like
in
symbolism.
Fairness, Tom, it did rhyme with white, so that's kind of where they decided to go with it.
There he is.
Well
there
done.
he is.
No, I'm just kidding, friends. Just kidding.
What are you hoping they'll let you back in after this?
All white, all right.
You've been dumping on them since before I even cared about politics. I first learned Robert George's name when you wrote an article trashing Trent Lott. I didn't even know you for like 6 years after that.
That's about God. You actually wrote that back in you actually read that back in 2002. Well,
that's right. I was a very, very popular kid in college reading what was it? What magazine was that? The Nation.
Well, no. The Trent Lott thing I wrote in the New York Post and National Review. But the one where I decided I was not going to, that I was not going to vote for George W. Bush and his reelect in 2004 was in the New Republic. So.
Oh, good for you. Well, we can talk about Robert George's resume on our follow-up podcast. Shreya, I want to make sure to get you in here as well. Just talking about, you know, what it feels like to see, you know, in the middle of this huge debate over justice, to see that finally the oppressors of the police backed off of Roger Stone and no one else.
Oh, I mean, I wasn't surprised at all. In fact, it was so expected that I kind of just saw the news and carried on as normal.
Right.
And that is the state of our affairs today.
Yeah. It was like you saw the word Roger Stone, you're like, I bet he got pardoned. Oh, only he commuted. Oh, that's sweet.
Look at that.
You learn something new every day.
Just one point, Tom. Remember, Trump was in Florida yesterday, and Roger Stone was down in Florida as well.
Oh, so I know where this ends.
So
Go ahead.
on the bright side, it was a pretty short commute. So
boy.
Oh.
That was a free pun from a New York
All
City
right.
tabloid
Bye, guys.
So,
pardon me, Keisha.
bad close of the
Oh,
week
no.
for Justice.
I respect that. That was hell
That
of
was
good.
the follow-up was good. I
Thank you,
like that
Chris.
follow-up putback. But
Thank you.
The dad joke.
the bad week for Justice started
And you're the dad. And you're the dad. So you.
All right, we're moving on, Robert.
Sorry, Tom.
It's okay, Chris.
We won't interrupt.
This is your
We won't
first
interrupt
time
you
on the
anymore.
show.
We won't
On the-
interrupt you anymore.
I'm feeling
Tom.
super
Okay.
comfortable. This is great.
Yeah, well, good. It was a rough end of the week for Justice, but as we discussed, it was an interesting week for the Justice up to that point. Supreme Court finished off a term, a fairly dramatic term in terms of a lot of the opinions that they doled out. I want to talk about three specific ones, but if you go back to the term, it is the Supreme Court that ensured protections of LGBTQ workers in the workplace, struck down the Louisiana abortion bill that was signed into law last year, defended DACA, and a lot of these were 5-4 or sort of 6-3 decisions with Chief Justice John Roberts often siding with the liberals, although Neil Gorsuch also crossed the aisle a little bit. But three big things at the end of the week. First two had to deal with Trump taxes, which is they found that the court found, I believe it was 7-2 in both cases, that the New York or the Manhattan District Attorney's Office had the right to have a grand jury subpoena Donald Trump's taxes. And then follow up was that they also found that Congress had the right to subpoena them, but in the case of Congress, it was so long as it is in the purpose of figuring out legislation. But regardless, Cy Vance, who those of us who live in the New York City area know is always a man you can trust, our Manhattan DA, could pull those records before Election Day. First of all, do we think that we'll actually see Trump's taxes this year? A lot of head shaking for the people listening at home. Just a lot
Hard
of
no.
Lost all
hard
hope.
no.
No.
Lost all hope.
I mean, we live in a world where Roger Stone is walking free.
Right, in a top hat.
Not to go back to him, but I was like, it would be nice, but absolutely not. 2020 has taught me anything that if the worst could happen, it will happen. So I assume.
And just a quick throw that out there, we've got 135,000, give or take, people dead from the pandemic. We've got people still marching in the streets for racial justice in the wake of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery's deaths, and the tone deafness of the president in responding to those, and in fact his gassing of peaceful protesters in the park right across from the White House. If you still have about 40% of the country still supporting him, I don't think Cy Vance said, "Oh, I've got the tax records, and yes, it's true. He's been in hock to Russia." Those people will say, "Oh, wow. Well, that's it then. That's the final straw.
Yeah.
I'm on the Biden bandwagon."
Turns out this guy was corrupt all along.
It was corrupt all along.
We caught him.
We had news report after news report during the election in 2016 about how all of Trump's businesses had failed and had gone bankrupt. And the main talking point on the left still was that he was a brilliant businessman who knew how to make the art of the deal. What's
Art
this
of the
book
deal.
called?
The art of the
Deal.
deal.
The art of this.
Whatever. He didn't write it.
Yeah.
Which he did.
True.
And also, but that's the other thing we found out this week too. He also, didn't even take his own SATs.
Right, I
all-
But
forgot
are we
all about
surprised?
Yeah,
Typical.
Which also, imagine, is there a world where he wouldn't still be super rich and successful if he had gotten a 400 on the SAT?
He famously bragged, "I know all the words. I have the best words."
Yeah.
And at that point, I'm like, okay.
Well, and then this week he bragged that he like aced his cognitive test, which is
Yeah,
not a thing that
yeah.
people just go and do, right? Like you
Guess
don't go and
what?
take your cognitive test when you're, oh, I turned 35
sane.
or whatever.
And
It's only a thing you do when people are like, we have concerns.
Yeah, and
About
by the way,
whether or not
the doctors were
you can live
surprised
on your
that
own.
the doctors were surprised that he aced it, which is also not a good thing in my experience.
I bet you
imagine
thought
they
I
just had him
couldn't
draw a
drive.
clock, you
Yeah.
know?
They're
Well,
like,
it was very funny where he was actually saying, and this is part of the Donald Trump tell, if you've been watching him. He says these things like, the people, these people were just shocked and found it so unbelievable that I was able to do. They were so shocked and they found it so unbelievable that I was able to do this. And I keep thinking to myself, I don't think they were shocked for the reasons you think that they were so shocked.
Yeah. That's true. That's the important thing. We can safely deduce that he failed that test. He bragged about it
Yes,
so much.
Mr. President. Yes, Mr. President.
Like a grandfather with Alzheimer's. Like,
It's
I'm still here, guys.
it's rough. So I think the thing that was very also sort of shocking in that case is that it was 7-2, and both Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, who were Trump appointees, voted with the majority or sided with the majority on that. I think, my take on this, and I throw it to the group, I think Robert and I have talked about this a lot about Justice Roberts, and I think there might be a similar streak in Gorsuch and perhaps even Kavanaugh that says, like, I don't want to have even the perception that I am 100%, in debt to a Republican Party for what I have. I think with particularly in the case, like when you look at Roberts in the last few weeks and citing, particularly the Louisiana abortion ban case is interesting because he voted differently than he did on a similar law back in 2015, if I'm not mistaken, Robert. And it really had the feel of, I may personally be against abortion, but this is settled law, and I don't want the world to even think that I, Chief Justice John Roberts, am the Republican Party's tool. I am my own person. It's over. We're striking this law down.
But then at the same time, the birth control ruling this week was
yes.
kind of
Well,
like,
no,
but actually, I don't care about science or women, so don't get it twisted.
Well, no, I want to talk about that next, because what's interesting about that is that was also a 7-2 decision with and the two more Justice Breyer and Justice Kagan who voted with the majority on that. In the specifics of that case, it was whether or not the Department of Health and Human Services has the authority to allow carve-outs for any religious organization or any company to say on moral grounds that they won't won't have to cover something. And the two liberal justices in that case voted from the standpoint of they do have the authority, even if I disagree with this decision. And I think that's an important thing to talk about too. Please go ahead, Timmy.
Yeah, and okay, so I want to rant for 1,000 years about why it's stupid about the birth control stuff, and also just want to say, from a separation of church and state standpoint, we also just learned about the giant PPE bailouts that the Catholic Church got, which means a bunch of taxpayer funding is going to go pay for sex abuse payoffs now too. So church and state, whatever, when you feel like it, you don't have to pay taxes, but you can take our money. That's fine. And you can exclude people from your organization and make up lies about how they're a danger to children when you're actually the ones who are. That's fine. And then on the other hand, we're also just saying that apparently if somebody has a religious belief that they don't have to listen to science, they can just say whatever they want to, that somehow determines what their employees get to spend their compensation on. Why are those things related? Why does your opinion on how birth control works, which is wrong anyway, it's factually wrong, why do you get to decide what happens with you don't get to decide how I spend my money, so why would you decide how my health insurance get used? And aside from the fact that access to birth control is the biggest factor in an individual person being able to determine their economic and independent future as a human being, and the thing that lifts people out of generations of poverty, aside from that, it's just bad science. They don't understand how it works. and I'm gonna flip this table and leave. Okay.
I just want to plus that because I was like, oh, this leaves the door open to not wanting to have to vaccinate if it goes to like it opens the door in a way that I think is really dangerous. So you're not going to cover an HPV vaccination, like, and then it's a very slippery slope that I think it will literally endanger people's health.
Or PrEP. What if somebody said they, like
Exactly,
get to a place where we could legitimately end HIV in a lifetime? It could be possible, right? Like there's a new drug that's out that is an injection that works like effectively, possibly better than Truvada does. And yeah, that it's a very real possibility that there's going to be an argument like, no, we shouldn't cover this slutty drug.
And I actually see that as now an argument that can be made because of how this case came out. So I just wanted to flag that because it's like, yeah, PrEP, HPV, there's other things that are actually impact not just my individual rights, but can really impact greater society just objectively. We should do it to empower people, to give people autonomy, but also it's gonna start turning into the culture war of masks. And I'm just waiting for it, guys. 2020.
That was like an honors course that I just took there. And everything I don't know. But
I will say,
Robert, go ahead.
Well, no.
Good luck.
No. I wasn't even. I was not even going to engage on that particular aspect. But to the broader point that you made that John Roberts is definitely concerned about the legitimacy of the court in the big picture. And I think somebody wrote this week that Roberts was ruled in the majority in, I think, 60 out of 61 cases, something like that, which was like almost unheard of, which meant he was scrupulously trying to be the center of the court. Now, that center is probably several ticks to the right, further than many people on this panel would like. But that does lead him into places where he will knock down the Trump administration on DACA because he basically says you didn't do your homework. You brought this kind of mishmash kind of a case here, and you expect us to sign off on it. Sorry, I'm not going to do that. Similar with the abortion case. So in that sense, it's not he's arguing almost from not so much say quote the rule of law, but from the rule of the legitimacy of the court and the importance of stare decisis, and the role of precedent. So in that sense, I mean, I think kudos to Roberts. And oh, by the way, this goes back almost a year when Roberts was the deciding vote in slapping down the administration on their trying to change the language of the census. I think the Chief Justice doesn't trust this president and doesn't trust how they bring cases towards the court, and he rules against them in those situations.
And I think, speaking of the contraception mandate, like that has its roots in the ACA too. So that kind of predates the Trump administration. That carve out, the ability to have those kinds of carve outs was, I don't think there's a direct line, but it has its roots in getting a few conservative Democrats who are stopping the vote for the ACA on board.
This one was sort of they called this particular case Little Sisters of the Poor,
Yep.
chapter 2, where literally you have a nun. You have these nuns who said they didn't want to pay into a contraceptive mandate, and because they thought it was just being, for want of a better phrase, sin adjacent. In terms of no, but in the
I like it. It's funny.
in Catholic doctrine, there is a thing called being sin, not wanting to put yourself even in the presence of sin, and having to pay into the mandate for the contraceptive coverage, which they were morally opposed. They thought that was against their constitutional rights. And look, there's a lot of arguments one can make on abortion and so forth, but that was a complicated one, and it was not surprising that the court basically came down in the same way as the precedent that they had set 4 or 5 years ago.
But I think that if they're going to come down on the side of like, this organization should not be forced to be a part of this thing, right? Because they are opposed to it, right? But we don't make them consistently apply that. They don't come down on the side of, we are not going to cover, for instance, like erectile dysfunction drugs. What if
Yes.
you're not married?
I was gonna say that.
What if
Yeah.
you're gay? Yeah. And I don't have any problem with people getting erectile dysfunction drugs. Like, I have no problem with
Not
that.
because
I
I
would
know, but like that was
Right.
what like
Chris just is like,
It's
when a moment's
also
notice, he'll
fine.
say it.
It's
I
fun.
turned
But
so
it's-
red.
Don't be. There's nothing to be ashamed of.
They aren't consistently applying this thing, not even on sexual stuff, right? Like, they don't consistently apply any of these things. And like, I was raised Catholic, so I know how hypocritical they are and how routinely they will set rules that are very specifically just for certain people. And it's not even, and nuns, like, honestly, can be really cool. They were like actually the first social justice like activists that I saw as a kid, because they were against war, and they were against nuclear proliferation. They were for unions, very much like standing up for indigenous people's rights where I grew up. And then something happened, and everybody that was a cool nun seemed to have left after Vatican II or something. I don't know. But now it's
Timmery, they
they're
just
going
had
to
to
define themselves by virginity. I don't know.
Timmery, they just decided to change their habit.
Oh.
No.
Oh man.
Okay, you guys will have none of this. I understand.
All right. Look,
I
I'm
got
gonna
that
tee you
one.
up.
I didn't get the other one.
I'm going to tee you up for a pun in a minute, my friend, but I want to make sure, Shreya and Chris, that we get you in here as well in this conversation in terms of, this ruling this week or the broader impacts of the court. But
Go ahead, Shrey. You can go first.
You can go first. I'm still formulating my ideas.
after you.
I think that the big thing here is, like, you're talking about how Roberts doesn't quite trust Trump, but Roberts made this situation. Like, Roberts was the deciding vote in Citizens United, like, that like allowed money to just come in big time into elections. Not saying that he necessarily was for Trump, but like, he started it. He also is the one who assured everybody that racism was gone in the South. And so, like, let's not forget that too. Like, I don't, like, sure, these are like sort of wins, but they're only sort of wins. Like, every single one of the rulings that went in like favor of progressives or liberals, like, were just from technicalities. And I don't trust him. I don't, like, I still think that the court is illegitimate because of Mitch McConnell taking away Obama's rightful pick and holding that, like, and just holding that ransom. So he can try and like establish this institution as much as he wants, but like, it's lost its credibility in a lot of ways. And I'm just hoping that RBG can keep up her planks.
I will just take others. I personally think that Citizens United was decided correctly. Huge amounts of money were flowing into the political system over the last 40 or 50 years, 40 years at least, since Buckley versus Vallejo in 1978. And the amount of money that's in the system now is basically not largely different than it's been over the last few decades. I think Democrats overstate the impact of Citizens United. And just one other quick
I'll find
point.
a graph.
Well, yeah, but one other quick point. And the other thing is too, if the money's there, it's not overwhelmingly on one side as one might expect. The progressives do very well in terms of the fundraising. In fact, the right wing over the last couple of years have been tearing their hair out because how much money that groups like Act Blue have managed to raise for Democratic candidates, and Republicans realize that they don't have that they've been completely and totally outflanked on that. One last thing. I was going to say, Keisha, go ahead.
I was just my only little pushback is I feel like Citizens United is in a way linked to the thing we're complaining about, is the crony capitalism monarchy we live in. And I hear that, but I think it is unfair to say that isn't impacted in terms of how much like, and I'm taking away parties from this conversation, not left or right. I'm talking about the impact of corporations. So I would push back there and leave the left right of it out of it.
Yeah, it just kind of allowed, like, there was money before, and I like completely disagree with like the same amount of money as now. I disagree with that. I can't find the proof right now, so it's a hunch. But I think the bigger thing with the ruling is the ruling said, like, before it wasn't technically supposed to be there, and now the ruling said, oh, go for it, absolutely. And so you now have the Koch brothers who are just, we have, the Republicans have less people donating. Bernie famously had millions of people donating, like, what's that, like $27?
It was 18 cents a person.
They're like they're raising money, but like you're bringing corporations in who have very select interests, and it's not at all part of this process. It's like part of a broken, crony, capitalistic oligarchy.
One quick thing I will say, that just getting away from the money thing, getting away from the money question and getting back to the Supreme Court, because I think it's important, and Timmerie actually caused me to remember this, which she talked about. I think she was talking about nuns and their support for indigenous people and so forth. One case that we should not ignore is
Oklahoma.
Neil Gorsuch being the deciding vote in what was called McGirt versus Oklahoma, which is kind of complicated, but
I read a very short description that kind of explains it perfectly, which is to say, what is interesting about this story is that McGirt and a few other people, all convicted criminals who, it sounds like, really did some terrible things.
They did do some terrible things.
Rightly argued that they should not have been. Their argument was that their case shouldn't have been brought up. They were imprisoned by Oklahoma State, and they argued that they should have been governed by the federal government in those trials, because they did believe that the state of Oklahoma had sovereignty over that land. And Gorsuch and the liberals agreed. It's just kind of funny to me that, like, it is a good thing. It's a very productive thing. But, like, if you read up on these cases, like, these are some horrible people.
Yeah, I mean, the
precedent's always set that way.
I'm 100% guilty, but
this
the
basically
state wasn't right.
Given that approximately the eastern half of Oklahoma are all basically covered by tribal treaties. It's given these people, so Oklahoma is now basically owned by these tribes and their laws. So it is interesting, and I will say this: this along with the LGBT rights verdict. Establishes Neil Gorsuch as arguably the most interesting justice, and I would say this: going over the next 10 to 15 years, the Supreme Court will be determined by the tension and the communication between Gorsuch on the right and Elena Kagan on the left, because they both have very interesting ways of looking at the laws and interesting ways of trying to figure out how to get different ideological viewpoints into a shared space. So I would say, look at those two people for the next couple of decades.
Shreya, I think my favorite part of the last 10 minutes was the absolute look of horror on your face when Robert said that he thought Citizens United was decided rightly. Which when Chris was like, I'm going to go get a chart, I was like, we don't need a chart, just look at Shreya's face. But Shreya, please, thoughts on the court.
Oh gosh, this stuff makes me nervous because I don't really have like a great knowledge in this area.
Mm.
And I feel like most of what I know about the Supreme Court could be argued as like just like ideological talking points that I've kind of just digested over the years. So like Citizens United to me is, all I know is like giving corporations a voice, and that's kind of the extent of what I know. That's not fair. I'm like dumbing myself down more than I should be. But to an extent that is what it is. I think in terms of the cases thus far, it was, I don't know, I think either Chris or Robert mentioned it before, but like we just got lucky. And so someone else said that we shouldn't be celebrating, and I agree with that. We just ended up getting lucky that people were lazy. And didn't argue their case properly. But that doesn't mean that very soon someone will do it correctly, and then we will be screwed. And I have a feeling that is going to be sooner rather than later. And I would put my money on the fact that it will be the same court, and while we are giving Roberts and Gorsuch a lot of laurels now for what they did, I don't think we're going to be doing that when they are given the chance to vote the way they probably really want to on a case that is brought to them properly.
I think that those are all really fair points. I do want to add one thing. I think Chris and Shreya, you both made the point about getting lucky, and certainly like there was a certain amount of luck in the fact that your more conservative entities presented bad cases. I do think a thing that's been underreported, the folks that were fighting for the more progressive ideals presented really good cases. And I think one of the like the LGBT, it's worth looking into the case that was prepared for the LGBTQ rights case. Like they basically wrote it so that Neil Gorsuch couldn't say no. And it is a court that like perhaps despite the conservative leanings, Robert and I have talked about this before, like certainly values and respects anyone who does their homework. And it's a lesson there's two lessons to the left here. Do your homework. There's another lesson for left-leaning voters that Robert George said on a thing we had to cut from last week's show. So I'm going to give it to him now. Robert, what should Democrats take from this term?
Black robes matter.
Boom. This week, the President of the United States, who as of this recording is still Donald John Trump, strongly came out against his own Center for Disease Control and said schools must reopen this fall. The CDC's demands and things that schools need to do are too expensive. And if schools don't reopen, he is threatening to cut their federal funding. And his big defense was that we've seen that the immune systems on kids are really strong and great, and they can beat this disease. Chris, as a teacher, just a quick question. Are there normally other people, I haven't been in a school in a long time, are there normally other people besides kids in schools who could get sick or carry diseases or transmit them?
Yes.
Like,
what do you want me to?
Thank you so much. That is exactly what I wanted you to say. So what do we think of this? Should schools reopen in the fall? That is a complicated question.
I mean, I'd love it. I would love it if we could. Wouldn't that be great? Because how much does it suck to be a kid right now?
Yeah.
Like, this is the worst.
How much does it suck to be a parent with kids, with parents at home?
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, we have
yeah, the only person who's winning right now is Jeff Bezos. That's it. Jeff Bezos is winning, and everybody else is having a horrible time. And I'd love
Jeff
if we could
Bezos'
reopen
ex-wife
schools.
too.
Okay. Yeah.
Fair.
Bezos has a many-year win streak that he's going on right now.
Yeah, but like it's we're not doing any of the things that would make that possible. And then he's drawing all these comparisons to these other countries as though like, well, these other countries did it. And it's like, would you follow all those other countries off a cliff if they jump? Well, you should follow all those other countries and a bunch of other stuff they're doing. So
There's actually a great data point about that. Because he like the countries that he was claiming, I think it was like Germany's, like Norway, Sweden. Their cases confirmed per day, I think it was Sweden was 11, Norway was 10, Germany had 298, and at that day alone, US had 55,000.
Yeah.
So like,
which was a record high, which we beat on Friday at 70,000 plus.
Exceptional. We are
USA.
exceptional.
USA.
USA.
you have him like pulling people out of prison because, or like cronies out of prison because they're going to run risks. And you like, yeah, I want to be in school. I want to be with my kids. Virtual learning, it doesn't like work. I mean, I also knew it wasn't going to work just because I did virtual or grad school. And like, you don't have the same sort of commitment when you do it. But like with Betsy DeVos coming in saying, no, schools need to be open. Don't ask me how. That's for other people to decide. Like, that's the same thing that Trump did with the economy. He's like, I don't know how to do it. Let the states decide. Like, it's just completely passing the buck. It's like, of course we want to be there, but he fucked up. And we're not going to be, like, we should not be there.
That's, I think, the thing that's most frustrating about this. The CDC put forward a plan, and he was like, nope, but we should open. And we have it's like a three-layered problem. You have an educational crisis, a health crisis, and an economic crisis. You know, like it's even if we paid every single, person to stay home, like it still would not be good for kids to not be, around other kids and having that learning in a day. I think what's so frustrating is there's a debate, but no one's coming forward with an actual plan. And it's like, sure, all right, let's figure it out.
These motherfuckers won't give us supplies, and now they're going to be giving us face masks and stuff as well.
Oh, sure, face masks. You can't get pencils for your class, but you're going to get face masks. So all of this is just so infuriating because you said a plan, and that's all I can think is like, none of this have we thought about having a plan. If we had any plan at any point, we could do what we want. More Americans could do anything they want to do, but that's not the name of the game. So I'd love for schools to open because parents could work. They could work uninterrupted. Like, there's so much more in society, but like, we are going to fail at this. It is going to be so bad. It's going to be bad.
It's the kind of thing that we should have started planning for the minute schools closed, and not just like, even if we thought we might reopen this year, like there should have been a nationwide plan for, all right, how do we reopen in the fall? Even if for whatever reason we can, like, let's say miracle happens and we can reopen in the spring, great. Then we throw that plan out. We don't need it anymore, or have it there in case there's a resurgence. And instead the focus was on opening up bars, opening up restaurants, making people go back to work so that they die. No thought whatsoever on schools, as happens.
I gotta say, I had things not gone the way they did, I would have had a first grader this fall. I had an abortion, but thank God I did. I will forever be a New York taxpayer because they paid for it. I cannot for the life of me imagine having to go through this shit right now. And if anything, this whole coronavirus shenanigans is like is excellent promotion for good birth control and access to reproductive rights. And I truly, truly hope like big abortion was behind this, because I just think this is doing great shit for their brand.
Right.
I don't know. There's not much to do during quarantine.
Yeah.
Like,
that's just
that's what you think. But then schools are closed and you're like, what? What am I going to do with all this?
Oh my goodness.
Right.
I think
Oh.
Black Robes Matter just got a competitor for show title with Big Abortion was behind this.
Big abortion was behind this is my vote.
All right.
It's Illuminati.
We'll
I
see how-
might be biased.
I'm a one-issue voter, and big abortion is it.
Make it bigger.
By the way, I meant to bring
That's
this
what
up
she
before.
said. Hey-oh.
I meant to bring this up before, but I think the Supreme Court, in ruling on this contraception mandate, made a great argument for Medicare for all, because it is not fair for employers to have to deal with the burden of healthcare at all. And if Democrats
Exactly.
listen to me, that's how I'd argue it. I'd always argue it from I support Medicare for all from the standpoint of it's time to stop putting burdens on these corporations.
And then they have to make no moral judgments about what the hell I'm supposed to do. And we could all be like, fine, have your beliefs, but I'm taken care of.
Well, except the slight problem with that formulation is we already have there, and this will be a fight, I would imagine, coming up in the next Congress. There is something called the Hyde Amendment, which
That
prevents.
sounds sinister.
Well, yeah. It's not named after Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's named after the late Congressman Henry Hyde, which prevents federal funds from being used on abortions. So if we do move into the direction of Medicare for all or some other version of single payer, these fights that we're now having on the side of whether corporations should be supporting birth control and other matters, it will be a fight on the Medicare for all side as well. So
Bring it.
I guess we gotta hide the amendment.
Very nice.
Chris, you a dad.
I got a mug to prove it.
Oh man, that eye roll from Timmery tells me that I think we may have hit our end of the show for today. Thank you so much, panel. This was a great conversation. It's good to see you all again, and good to be back doing this show. Thank you very much, Dr. Timmery, for being with us. Thank you very much, Keisha Zoller, for being with us. Thank you very much, Shreya Sakar, as always.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris Kunzio.
Thank you.
And thank you, Robert George. And also, very quick thank you to Kevin Scott for the show animation, to Joanne Harris for our show theme song, for Declan Chowley and Jordy Belair for the show Eagle, and of course to Ned Thorne for helping me put these together every single week. Now, for this week's musical guest, going to be throwing things down to the great city of Charlotte, North Carolina, where I think a few weeks ago, the good people at Disney World, reopening this weekend, announced that Splash Mountain's theme is going to change to reflect The Princess and the Frog. And so singing a song from that movie that I think we all need to hear right now is one of the best voices I have ever had the pleasure of hearing live. She is the writer and creator and actor behind the Bubba Moo Diaries. Find them on Facebook at Bubba Moo Diaries. Ned Thorne, please send us to the Queen City for our friend Jamelia Patah. Ned Thorne, star wipe us out.
Mama, I don't have time for dancing. That's just gonna have to wait a while. Ain't got time for messing around, and it's not my style. This whole town can slow you down, people taking the easy way. But I know exactly where I'm going, getting closer and closer every day, and I'm almost there, almost there. People down here think I'm crazy, but I don't care. Trials and tribulations, I've had my share. There ain't nothing gonna stop me now, because I'm almost there. I remember Daddy told me fairy tales can come true. You gotta make them happen, it all depends on you. So I work real hard each and every day, now things for sure go my way. had my share. But I've climbed a mountain, I've crossed a river, and I'm almost there.